Hello again everyone and welcome to another Toon Boom tutorial. This one about a slightly more a niche area, shall we say, the X sheet. Something that a lot of people don't use in Toon Boom, and it's a traditional tool that is also still very useful for organizing and working with your drawings. Now, the reason why it's so useful is it actually has a function in there which doesn't exist in the timeline, and some of the functions in Toon Boom don't exist in other panels, so you need to know what all the different panels do and what their strengths are. And I'm going to show you a couple of useful things to get you used to working with and reorganizing and reordering and renaming your drawings in a faster, more efficient way that sometimes people find hard when they first start using the software. Okay, let's take a look. For this demo, what I've done is create 5 weird little drawings here. The main reason why they're so weird and different colors is just because it makes it easier for you guys to identify which one's which, and for me, because let's be honest, if it's not bright and colorful, it's not clear enough, and I like colors. So the main object of this tutorial is to show you how to add things, move them around, and reorder your drawings. Because when I came to Toon Boom from what was Flash, now Adobe Animate, one of the things that I missed was being able to go into a symbol and rework on my drawings there. See all the drawings within that symbol lined up on the timeline. Toon Boom doesn't have this function because the drawings sit within a folder on your computer, and it doesn't have this thing of go into that folder and work on those drawings. It might come in the future, and it's kind of like there's a few things that are sort of getting there, where there's now a drawing substitutions panel, but I still find this method working in the timeline is more beneficial because you actually have to expose the drawings to work on them. When I say expose, it's not like, flashing sort of in a long trench coat sort of expose. I'm talking about actually show them under the camera so that you can work on them. There's a send to desk function, but that's not really as simple, I think, personally, to use. So what we're going to do is we're going to talk about this method where we put them on the timeline, we can see them in the camera view, and then we can work on them, and then basically like bank them again, put them away until we need them. So I'm going to show you a few things and we'll go from there. The first one is if you delete drawings in the timeline, it doesn't actually delete them. Now, I'm sure you're aware of this if you've used the software a few times, but you'll see under your library tab, I've got 5 drawings in this layer. I've still got those there. And as soon as I click on the little notches or press the square bracket right key, it will go through, or the left one to go backwards, and I can put them all back in there. So it starts from the number 1. Toon Boom will automatically order your drawings 1 onwards, and using A, B, C as well. So if you had 1A, 1B, 1C, it would put them in that order. So say I've drawn these different drawings in here. I'm going to put in 3, 1, 5, 9, and then 7. So I've put them back in on the timeline in an order that isn't the same as what they were drawn in. This is a common thing when you are maybe working traditionally, or you're working with roughs, or you create duplicates of reusing poses, and maybe you want to make sure drawings are labeled as they are in the actual timeline there. This is where the X sheet has something really cool, because you can open up the X sheet if you don't have it, clicking the plus icon here, and then you'll get the option. But if it's open, you can just shift select these drawings. Make sure you don't right click with a pen and let go, because it will cut cells from the X sheet. Go down to drawings, and this option is only available in the X sheet. If you try and do it on the timeline, it doesn't exist, which is interesting. But there you go. Rename by frame. So you can just click that, and all of a sudden it goes 1, 2. Not quite sure why it's gone to 1 there. Oh, it's because it's the same. Sorry, that's the same frame. So let's try that again. Let's go back. There we go. Now I could cut that mistake out. But why would I do that? Because it's more fun. Okay, so here we go. We've got our drawings in there. Right click, drawings, rename by frame. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, so that's a good example. Although it was a mistake, if you have the same drawing in, it will just drop it in. It won't overwrite it or duplicate it or anything like that. It just kind of keeps the initial naming. So that's a good way of naming things correctly. Now, if you have, for example, maybe you have multiple drawings, so we have the same, but I've maybe got it held for a few frames at a time. Now, if you're wondering, by the way, what this view is down here, I just double click that square to change the color, and I click the tiny little thumbnail. That's why I've got this open, just because I don't have many drawings, so it's a bit easier, a bit more visual for you to look at. Okay, so now I have 1 and 3, and again, if I do this now, shift select, right click, drawings, rename by frame, this is going to give me 1 and 3 with a hold of 3 and a hold of 2. So that's another useful thing that you can do. This is really useful if you're working traditionally and you are doing your keys, or you are offloading your rough keys somewhere else and you want to work out the timing. You can do all your drawings one frame after another, frame after frame, but then you can time them out and then do that rename by frame, and it will organize things nicely for you. The best thing about being able to do that rename by frame if you're working on singles, on ones, is that, for example, say you're working on your hands and you've added loads to the scene, and you kind of have got to a stage where you're like, it's a real mess now. I need to sort this out. I need to expose, all my hands on the timeline and reorder them and so on. Well, it's a good way of doing it, renaming them, but how do you get them all onto the timeline in the first place? What I like to do is delete a section, maybe at the end of your timeline, where if you're working on the scene and you're doing it in there, or ideally start a fresh scene, bring in your rig and right click on that first frame and go to exposure, and then we're going to go sequence fill. Now this one's cool because it allows you to just basically pick what the starting value is going to be, the increment, and how long the hold. So I might just put my hold to 1. You can put it to 2 if you want to. There's a few other options in here. This is more to do with like if you are actually pasting cycles and so on. But I'm going to press OK. And it's just put 1 drawing in. So you need to check how many drawings you've got here. It's not a big deal normally to do that. The real quick way of doing this as well, by the way, is that, and a lot of people do this, if you press the right, it's kind of like the arrow key, but it's the full stop key, and then the comma is the left arrow key, like the less than or the greater than. You can just press toggle those and press them with the square bracket. So I could press the right square bracket and then the greater than or the full stop to go to the next frame, and then double tap and then go through. And you can also just press F5 all the way along here, and this way you can just press the sort of the square bracket key and then the greater than and then the square bracket key. You can do that and very quickly go through, and a lot of animators tend to use that manual method. Or if you do know what you've got, so I know I've got 5 frames, I can shift select, right click, exposure, sequence fill, okay, and there's 5 drawings there. Now, why am I showing you a method that you have to count all these little notches or know exactly how many drawings there are? Well, it's actually not that difficult to know how many drawings there are. If you've got lots of them, just go to the folder, your Toon Boom folder on your computer. Look for the folder inside Elements, named the same as your drawing. So if it's called Drawing, look for Drawing. It's pretty easy to find because you can't have 2 things named the same. So go and find that folder, and then just press Control-A, Command-A, and select and see how many files are in there. Discount any folders or anything extra in there, or anything that isn't an actual TGA or TVG. Yeah, there we go, TVG, which is the Toon Boom drawing file. ignore anything that isn't a drawing file, and then just look at the count of how many drawings you have in there. That's if you've got loads. So if you've got 79 drawings, you can quickly fill 79 drawings there. But this is also really handy, this method, to paste in randomized bits of animation. So say you've got like a textury kind of effect that you're playing through and you want it to run under some traditional animation, make vector animation feel a little bit more hand-drawn, you can just loop that sequence. That sequence fill has the option of a cycle. So when you do that, exposure, sequence fill, just turn cycle on, and you can then have a nice little cycle going backwards and forwards. And it's a really good way of dipping in and out of your drawings that you have inside your folder and the work you've already done. A couple of other useful features whilst we're in the right-click menu there in drawings and exposures. You can see I've got this drawing of this like punk dude existing, but then there's a duplicate exposure in there. Now this is when you just press the square bracket like left and then right again, you get a duplicate exposure. It's the same drawing, but you're getting like this line, which is kind of annoying, especially when you're doing lip sync and you are using substitutions, because it looks like the drawing is changing, but it's not actually changing. If you want to get rid of those, you can select, and if you've got a complicated rig, you can collapse it down using the 0 shortcut. And then, shift select the whole timeline, just right click and then go to exposure, and you can use remove duplicate key exposure. And that will remove anywhere where there's a duplicate key exposure, it will just remove them. Sometimes as well you will find, let's bring this one back to here, press delete and then F5. So sometimes you'll find if you've accidentally pressed backspace or delete, you've got little gaps in your drawings, and this is one of the most annoying things to deal with. If somebody's removed a key by pressing delete instead of like the remove key exposure F7 or remove key remove key frame F7 or remove key exposure button. If you press delete on something, it creates an actual hole in there, which you can press F5 and fill it in, but it's just a bit of a pain because if there's lots of layers that have that going on them, it's very hard sometimes to find those blanks. So there's a really cool function in here. You can just shift select, right click, exposure, and then you can fill the empty cells, and then also right click again, exposure, remove duplicate key exposure. So that's a 2-click way, well, 4-click way, two things you have to do to tidy up your exposures. If there's any holes in there, just be careful if you do have gaps and it's been passed on from another animator, maybe working on a project together, that they aren't doing that to try and hide something. Because if you are trying to hide something, the best way to do it is to just create a blank exposure with this button and then press F5, because then if somebody does that thing and fills the exposure or presses F5, you're not going to have something all of a sudden start appearing again, which is going to be less than useful. Okay, so there's some really useful tiny little tips to do with exposures and drawings and showing them and hiding them and renaming them. I hope some of it's been useful to you. I definitely found out about this at different stages of my learning of Toon Boom. So when I found that exposure tip in the X sheet, it kind of blew my mind a little bit. So I hope it helps some of you out there. Thanks for watching.